Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Comfort and Chaos. Do you remember the 23rd night of September? I do. I remember a lot of nights and a lot of Septembers. And I don't remember any of them being this damn hot. I don't know where in the world you're listening to this podcast at right now, but I'm sure wherever you are, it's hotter than it's supposed to be. And honestly, y'all, when it's hot at a time when I think it's supposed to be not, I start getting a little antsy. Just a general level of disturbance for this time period that the UN has officially labeled as the era of global boiling. And you know what? The United Nations, I do appreciate you. I appreciate a lot of the things you do. But that terminology is just not helping, at least me, with this current predicament of living in the era of global boiling. Personally, when I conjure up the image of being boiled alive, I'm not exactly feeling rip-roaring to tap into a positive, motivated state. In fact, the word boiling in itself kind of just makes me feel like a culinary item on the universe's fondue night menu. I don't know. But what I do know is that today we are talking about something that inspires all of us, that fills us with a sense of aliveness and connectedness and hope. And that topic is love. Today's guest is someone who I consider to be a true leader in the frontiers of love and relationships and how we can do them in a more embodied, empowered, inspired way. Molly Reagh is a relationship coach, but she's also so much more than that. An important distinction in what makes Molly different from so much of the standard relationship advice or information that's out there is that Molly's not afraid to challenge the norms. She's not afraid to peel back the layers of why we do what we do and why we show up in relationships at all. And most importantly, how our relationship with ourself reflects the relationships we have with all the other people in our lives. Molly is the founder of Bonobo Relationships, which is a relationship coaching platform that offers one-on-one work, couples work, polycule, you name it, she will work with you. Her expertise is really doubled down in the queer community and the polyamorous community, which is really amazing because those are communities that really do not receive a lot of support or attention in modern relationship conversations. And as you'll hear in the interview today, we talk about all of those things and how we can all do our part in making the world a more flexible spectrum for all types of people in all types of relationships. And honestly, I could just go on and on about how amazing I think Molly is and how grateful I was to share this time with her. But I will go ahead and let this conversation do the talking for me. So y'all sit back, open your hearts, and welcome my guest, Molly Reagh of Bonobo Relationships.
We all are here together just to learn about ourselves and how we can take care of everybody else. Living on a planet that is circling the drain, we do the best we can to not just go insane. It's comfort and chaos.
All right, Molly Reagh, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Eli. I'm so happy to be here today.
Happy to have you here. Where are you calling in from today?
So I am in Sacramento, California.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
How's the weather out
it
there?
here. It's not 105 degrees. It's like, I think in the high 80s today. And we're all like, yay. That sounds
That sounds
normal.
nice.
That's not excruciatingly hot. So yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I've never been to California, so I don't
Oh,
really yeah, I look like someone who would
you
probably
do.
have been to California.
I'm like, you've never surfed?
Well, yeah, I actually have. I
Okay,
live on an island on the other side of the state country.
got it. Okay,
Yeah, but so Sacramento, that's like Central Valley kind of stuff.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
No
it's a
beach.
little, yeah, it's a little different, I
A
hear.
little different. I love it here. It's like not too cool for school, which I love. It's just kind of like, we're
Sure.
Sacramento. We're not cool. We love that about ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, about an hour and a half to the Bay Area. So San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, and then also
Yeah.
similar distance to like Tahoe and a really beautiful natural, world. And so
Yeah.
um, I think it's a great place. And I'm in California. I'm born and raised in California.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, so it's also the capital. And I'm like, I don't have pride about a ton of things, but weirdly, I'm like,
Right.
I have California pride, and it's just silly. I mean, I like as I say it, I'm like,
No,
that's so silly, but yeah, I do.
stand by it. Stand by
I
it.
do.
And
Yeah,
you're a pretty avid mushroom forager, I hear.
yeah. I is avid the right word? Sure. Yeah, I love it. I love mushroom foraging
Yeah.
because it makes me feel like a kid. It's like a treasure hunt in the forest or wherever you're
Yeah.
doing it. For me, it's usually
Right.
in the forest. And I just think it's so exciting and lovely to be in a beautiful place and, being able to, like, I usually forage for edible culinary mushrooms. But, if you have a quote unquote bad
Yeah.
day, which means you don't find mushrooms, you're like, well, bummer, I walked in the woods all day. Like, it's not bad, like there's nothing bad about that.
Right.
You're just like, oh, well, I didn't get a basket full of delicious mushrooms. I just was in a beautiful place walking around with
Yeah, you
generally
can't
with
lose.
friends. No, it's literally a win, extra win. But yeah,
Oh, it's awesome. I would
yeah.
love to get into that. We don't really have solid mushroom in North Carolina we do, but not where I live. So I'd have to
Mm.
do some mushroom tourism, I think,
Yeah,
which
sure.
I'm sure is a thing.
Although I bet there's some, whether or not they're like edible or culinary, like I bet there's some cool fungus out there. I don't know. Maybe you'd
Yeah.
be
Oh, I'm,
surprised.
fungus finds a way, I guess.
Fungus does find a way. I love that. Fungus finds a way. Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
we need to learn to
for words.
be more like fungus.
Oh, we definitely do. There is so much like beautiful metaphor and symbolism around mushrooms and mycelial networks and mutual aid and community that is just extra beautiful in terms of why I love mushrooms.
I've learned to love mushrooms from like a culinary aspect because I grew up
Mhm.
hating them. Like I don't know, something about just like the dirtiness of
Lots of
them, the
people.
squishiness.
Slimy.
Yeah.
Totally.
And then in 2020 I went vegan or started eating plant-based and some like my
Okay.
taste buds changed and all of a sudden I like craved mushrooms and so now they're my
Love that.
mushrooms are my homies.
Yeah. Mushrooms. Yeah. And I mean, not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but like the store bought just like white button mushrooms aren't that, I mean, they're fine, right? But like that, they're not that great. And so if
Once you start
that's
exploring,
once you start, right? Like
here's another metaphor for relationships is
once you start opening up your world, it's
it's hard to go back to those just white button relationships.
ooh, ooh, look at that. Look at that beautiful segue. But yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that's a great
Yeah.
hobby to have, and I
Mhm.
hope the fall is fortuitous for you in that.
Thank you. Yeah, we're about to come into porcini season, so hoping to head out to some places. Actually, it's already been porcini season in some places, but heading to the coast
Exciting,
hopefully in the next
exciting,
few weeks or month or so. Yeah, yeah,
nice. Well,
yeah.
so podcast listeners, bait and switched. You. We're actually not talking about love today. We're just going to talk about mushrooms,
Let's go. Let's
and
do
we're all here for it. But what what's on your heart today? What's feeling present? What's feeling
it.
pertinent to you in this moment today?
Regarding love, regarding relationships, regarding anything.
Anything, your life. It's all connected. So,
Hmm.
what's the topic that's just coming at you today?
a topic that has been just so present on my, I'll say specifically on my heart is my friendships these days. Like um, I went through that this whole past year has been a very important one and a very challenging one in the sense of I've felt very introspective and introverted, which is not how I have identified throughout my life.
Oh,
I've
really?
not yeah, I've definitely been like an extrovert, theater kid, like have that identity very kind of solidified, and went through a breakup last year, and just like really it's been since the winter, so like January, February of this year, where I've been more present to my feelings and did a lot of, I'm going to use the very, very general term of healing, which is hard. And like the
Yeah.
growing pains of all that. Like it's, I think people think healing and
Yes.
like, oh, that's so nice. Like, no, it fucking sucks. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So like, it's really hard. And so a lot of my year has been that. And so really like craving alone
Mm.
time and just being with myself and feelings. And it's been really hard, really beautiful, really
Yeah.
good. And I'm feeling these kind of vestiges that feel both new and old of having that kind of extrovert side come back into, but it feels more authentic now. And so I've been spending a lot of time with just people I just love so dearly. And this past weekend, I just had so much wonderful friend time with a variety of different people, and I'm just
Yeah.
like feeling so full
Mm.
and grateful and happy, and yeah, it just feels really good.
That's amazing. And
Yeah.
yeah, and to go back to like I didn't identify as extrovert or introvert before, and
Mm-hmm.
then things changed. I think the cool thing, there's not a lot of cool things about COVID, but there are some interesting things that happened as a result of what we had to go
Yeah.
through, is that everyone was kind of forced to figure out what that identity meant to them, or if it really meant as much as they thought.
Yeah.
I always grew up very introverted, and I still, energetically feel like an introvert. If I'm around a group of people for too long, I need to like retreat and recover.
Yeah.
But during COVID, I had thought like, oh, I just need so much alone time and I need to be like alone all the time. And then you are not presented with the choice to be around other people, and
Mm.
suddenly you're like, actually this isn't what I want. I want the choice. I want like the option to be in
Mm.
community, and then also the option to retreat from it. So I think it kind of, and then extroverts were kind of thrust into a more introverted position, and maybe they saw some of the benefits of taking time away from people.
Absolutely.
So we're kind of all led to this middle ground of,
Yeah.
it's really a balance, and there's no one way to be.
Right. And I mean, that gets me into this idea of even just labels and identities as something to even um, question sometimes, and to say, is this
Sure.
something that I've just kind of latched onto? And so I've built an identity around that without kind of more of the
Yeah.
discerning elements. And, or is this something that really does resonate? And I've come to a place of like, I actually like the if I'm going to choose a word, and language is important to communicate and express ourselves, but
Absolutely.
like I really like ambivert, because it's really a moment by moment, right? Like there will be days where I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm good. And even right now, I'm like, okay, like I had that good friend time. I'm like feeling like maybe I need a little, a day or two to recharge. Luckily, I live alone, so I have the opportunity to do that.
Amen.
Um, yeah, seriously. And there are times when I know, and to me, it's been about really being attuned to
Mm.
myself and attuned to, okay, what is the mood? And sometimes you have more control over that than others. Sometimes you have things you're like, well, I've committed to this and it's important for me to go. So like mood, whatever, it doesn't
Right.
matter. I will meet the world and the friends or whatever the day calls for. But I think the more that we can like, yeah, be able to attune to ourselves and honor that. And then in the moments where we don't have as much choice, we're like, it's okay because I have the choice most of the time.
I love
And
that.
that to me is like freedom and liberation.
Yeah,
Ultimately
yeah,
is choicefulness. And
absolutely. And to find
yeah.
that choice coming from an authentic and honest place, as opposed to like, oh, I'm
Mm,
choosing this because it's my identity, or I'm choosing this because it's pleasing someone else, as opposed to like just tuning into this moment, which is like the only present truth. That's
mm,
a hard one because I do it too. As like, as
absolutely.
someone who identifies as more introverted, I will tell myself if a friend invites me out, well, no, I shouldn't go out because I'm introverted and I don't think I should be going out. Like that's like 2 nights in a row. That's too much. But like actually, if I were to sit down and like think about it and feel into myself, I'm like, actually, I'm craving that. I'm going like,
Mm,
but I'm telling myself I shouldn't. And then I go and do it, and it feels so enriching and so fulfilling, and I come back just like charged up and happy.
yeah,
So it is about that tapping into the moment and just letting go of some of your hard lined identities and labels for yeah.
absolutely.
We're
Absolutely.
really going, we're really getting going with this already, but I want to take a moment just to kind of catch everybody up that what we're really here to talk about today and what you do. You're a relationship coach. Is that what you
Mhm.
refer to yourself as a relationship coach?
I do, yeah.
And a lot of your work, well, I'll just go ahead and read. I kind of stole your mission statement from your website, so I'm going to read that if
Go
you don't
for it.
mind.
Read it. Yeah.
Your mission is to help deconstruct the personal and social limits that keep you stuck in hurtful relationship dynamics and some societal personal limits. So tell us what that really means. What are these limits, these constructs that keep us all stuck, like we were just talking about?
So I see people, individuals, as part of a larger ecosystem. And that can be the ecosystem can be, right? We have a self, which even internally has its own ecosystem. And then we kind of, we think of ourselves as babies as we develop. We have an ecosystem which is our caregivers, our families of origin, or however we grow up. We have the neighborhoods we grow up in. We have the schools we attend, the larger culture and society, religious institutions. And we have all of these inputs. And they grow with us, right? That they're this ecology that we live within. And especially as we're developing, right? Especially as our minds are very, very young and they're growing at the most rapid rate.
Right. We're very dependent on outside
Absolutely.
sources. Yeah.
To develop our sense of self as an individual. And so we have these ideas of ourself that have been and not always intentionally, sometimes intentionally put there by all of these ecological inputs, right, by our
Yeah.
environment. And so we grow up and we become adults and or teenagers or whatever, we enter into other relationships, work relationships, romantic relationships, friendships. And we have all of these inputs that are in our subconscious. They're what some people call baggage, or you can call schemas or mental models or implicit learnings. Those are kind of the more sciencey terms. But I think generally it's the unconscious, often unconscious, sometimes a little more conscious views that we have about ourselves, about relationships, about it's our meaning making of the world. And those are important. And sometimes they're helpful, and sometimes they might not help us showing up in the most authentic or loving or, um, you know, intentional ways in our relationships. And so, as a relationship coach, I do a lot of work with the unconscious. I do a lot of work kind of understanding what what our beliefs are, what our unconscious might be saying and might be moving us towards, and really tuning to more of who is our self, right? Who is this self that is,
Right.
again, all of these words, higher self, best self, right? And then I don't totally align with those, but
Yeah.
I think those are things that the general public can kind of understand these kind of deeper, right?
Right. I guess what you mean is beyond the conditioning, beyond those things we took on,
Yeah,
what's kind of just holding all of that? Like what is the thing that's
sure. And and what do we want to keep and what do we want to shed, right? Because it's not that
Yes.
everything is bad, but it's saying, okay, according to who you are, right? When we can do values work and getting attuned to like, what are your values, and do these relationships and people and work life and all of these things, do those resonate with your
Yeah.
values? It can be looking at, how your ideal relationships, your wants and needs, and also looking at what society has told us is the
Right.
right way to do things. I think an important part of what I do and is I work with everyone in really any relationship, but I think if I were to be forced to have a niche,
Sure.
it would be like queer and non-monogamous relationships. So we are all conditioned in a mononormative or a culture that really puts monogamy on a pedestal, and
Yes,
to
absolutely.
a big degree heterosexuality as well. I think that is has a little more, honestly. I think at this in this day and age, I mean, obviously there's homophobia and transphobia is rampant, and I'm not denying that. And there is also cultural like underpinnings for acceptance and more queerness. Monogamy, though, people have real strong feelings about. The people are like, but I don't know about that one.
Uh, yeah.
And so looking at the conditioning of monogamy, which is like it is deep. It is deep of 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 what we think relationships should or should not be. And so a lot of, I think why I bring in the social piece into the work, I think we can't divorce ourselves from the socialization that we go through as humans, and looking at that and looking at, our individual development in our families of origin or our peer groups growing up, or, the kind of peak moments where those learnings that we have and the meaning making that we have of the world come up.
Sure.
And ultimately, relationships, and I truly think like everything is relational. And even just when I say relationships, I think a key fundamental part of that is our relationship with ourselves, is looking at how do I think of myself, how do I behave towards myself.
Yes.
And when we can look and heal the relationship and accept ourselves as we are, I think it really lessens defensive, like can lessen all of the kind of behaviors we see in our
The
relationships.
projections, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And so a lot of the work I do is okay, let's look at you
Yeah.
and what's going on there and how does this feel for you.
Mm.
So yeah.
That was fantastically put, first of all. I mean, you just kind of scooped it all and just put it very well. That was amazing. What I was hearing was, a lot of what you do is looking at these conditions, these cultural normalities that we take on, and we accept them as whole truth, right? We accept them as, this is the way I am, and this is the way I'm supposed to live based on what I've known, what I've been told, what I have learned to cope or survive, whatever it is. And so what you provide is a safe space to maybe just start to loosen up a little bit on those reins. Or maybe people already are starting to loosen up and they're looking for someone who can help them continue that process,
Absolutely.
which it's an equally exciting and terrifying process because of the cultural and societal aspect of it. Is that as soon as you start to let go of
Yeah.
the baggage or whatever of your culture, and you're in that kind of nebulous, unsure whether you're going to pick it back up or not, there's a lot of hearsay about what you should or shouldn't do from the people around you, and that's what makes it really tough. And it's nice to
Yeah.
have just a sounding board that is not even trying to convince you of anything, but is just aware of all the different ways you can be in the world and that you can do relationships with yourself, with others.
Mhm.
And so that's what kind of like how I found your Instagram, was that I was in that kind of phase myself of not really feeling at home in the relationships I was having with myself and with others, and the way I was, presenting to the world wasn't feeling authentic, and I was starting to find these communities of people that were finding their voice and their authenticity, and it was really resonating. And somewhere along the line, your Instagram came up, and it was like a oasis in the desert. It was like a very welcoming community, and the way that you present the information is just very concise and non-judgmental. So I thank you for that. It's very helpful.
Thank you for saying that, Eli. That means the world to me to hear, and that is my goal.
Yeah.
So hearing that reflected feels really good. I appreciate that.
I mean, I think the almost 11,000 other people that are following you probably feel pretty similarly. You're,
That's the hope.
happening for a reason. Yeah, but to I guess, to have that, that's why it's really important that you're doing this work, is to talk about the things that, like you said, people are still really not wanting to talk about. Non-monogamy, that is I would say, at least in my reality, I live in the South in North Carolina, pretty conservative area. I'm sure California is a little more open. I see the world as we expanded west, and that was the progress. And then somehow now the progress is making its way back east slowly. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's a both and that, there's this image of California as a beacon of, and we have our shits,
Sure.
we are just, there's plenty
you have humans, basically, is what you're saying.
I mean, actually, yes, exactly. We have humans, and we have a full range of humans. And I like to, part of my kind of tagline is tender, real, and right relationships. And the real part is I want us to be very just kind of brutally honest, or tenderly honest with ourselves.
To, make space for the shit.
Radically honest. Yeah. That and taking away mirages and pedestals, and just seeing us as we're all kind of muddling our way through.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess that gets back to bringing it back to, kind of the geography of there are trends, and
yes,
there are images of the South as a certain kind of person. There are images of California as a certain kind of person. And there's so much diversity within that I think is really important to dispel those myths and just, but at the same time, I mean, even if you just look at legislatively, yes, I think in general, California is probably a safer place for many people than, let's say, other places in the world, or even in the country are. And that is both a reality, and there are parts where it's not so, right? Counties or state or cities, or,
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess that begs the question of with stereotypes such as California, or, let's say LA is progressive. So therefore people that want a progressive lifestyle will go and move to LA.
Sure.
And so that it's it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, even though there are lots of discrepancies within that. So, I guess what I was trying to get at is that when you're in these communities where you feel as if you don't have anyone you can talk to about, say, oh, I'm questioning whether I am gay or straight. I'm questioning whether I'm monogamous or non-monogamous. And there's no one to actually share that with, that you feel safe. You kind of, I mean, for me, if I would have never found, online communities that welcomed the questioning, that welcomed the exploration, and things like your Instagram and the work you're doing, I probably would have stopped there and just would have listened to the culture around me and been like, well, there's just something wrong with me that I need to get over, and suck it up, and either just be lonely forever, or just get back into another monogamous escalator relationship until that fails again. And so that's the beauty of these brave communities, in my opinion. It's really brave to just kind of start this community of people that are willing to question, willing to let some things go in order to discover their true selves. And it embodies you with the power to find your values, basically.
Absolutely.
Which is how you want to live your life, is led by your real values.
Absolutely. And you read my little mission from my website, which is, it's a coaching website. It's for individuals because that's a client base. But when I think about even my larger mission, it's like I want a world where, like, if you're not doing harm to others, which, like, and even, I mean, even the word harm has, like, there's a lot of nuance in that. But if you, like, I want a world where everyone can question everything, where you can question, and there's not these huge societal impacts on what you are allowed to question, even, and what you are allowed to explore and experiment with, right? Where you can just be like, I'm going to explore authentically to be like, am I attracted to certain genders? What is gender, right? Like, what is, how does, all of these ideas, and how does that, resonate with me? Also knowing that things will shift. Like, I just want more fluidity in our world ultimately. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
I think my broader mission is, and I think this is why I kind of, we all have a love-hate relationship with social media, but I love a platform such as Instagram to bring ideas, and it's probably an echo chamber, in all honesty. And
Yes.
right, like, maybe there's some people who you can reach who are like, oh wow, I never thought about this that way. And like, I just want to bring more nuance. I talk about, like, what I think right now when we hear the word non-binary, we think like gender. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I want to live in a non-binary world, right? Like, binaries
Yes.
generally, again, even I wouldn't even say all non-binaries because that would be a binary, but generally non-binaries are limit, or binaries are limiting.
Right.
And the more we can have nuance into any conversation and say, hey, maybe we're both right here. Maybe there is some merit to both of what we're saying.
Right.
How do we meet in the middle, right? And I'm not saying I'm great at that, like with certain conservative value, or like, things like, I struggle with this in certain parts of my life. And I'm even, like, as I'm kind of figuring myself and my values out, I'm sitting with, okay, where do I draw a line? Where
Yeah.
do I, anyway, that gets into a lot of different territory, but I just want more nuance in all of our conversations. And I want to be the type of person, like, I prioritize relationship, just like, that's one of my core values. And there's a whole bunch of other kind of thing, like generosity and benefit of the doubt, and, like, trying connection and understanding is all under that umbrella of relationship. And I think that we really do heal and grow through relationship.
Yeah.
And so if I'm fighting with someone who has different beliefs than me, and, like, just like attacking and really,
Yeah.
and there is a place for sacred rage. I believe that. And that, I believe, is not actually in line with my values of justice and liberation for humanity.
Yeah.
And so, and then I that is my value, right? And I do not, again, people have different values and might say, oh, that's a really limiting way. We have to, like, fight and blah, blah. And I mean, we need to fight for
That's
justice.
part of a non-binary
Absolutely.
world, is that
Yeah.
they can have their beliefs too.
And I think also we all have a role in justice and liberation work. And I think mine is more on the relational front, right? Like, I don't have the brain for policy. Obviously, it's important in this day and age. And I'm just like, I've tried, I've done, I have a social work background. So I've been like micro, meso, and a little bit of macro level work. And I'm just like, it just doesn't fill me up. And, like, I love working with individuals and understanding kind of a human condition. And I have, like, I support all of my loved ones who do that work. And I'm like, and there's a part of me that's like, man, am I not, I think there was this, like, am I not good enough? Cause, like, all of my really cool smart friends are doing, like, policy work, and, like, I don't want to. And then I've come to a place of, like, no, this is my role in the revolution,
Right.
or this is my role in this work, is to
Yeah.
connect. And I think, again, with all that, like, kind of doing values work with myself, and a little bit more healing and understanding what authenticity feels like in my body, and, like, an
Yeah.
embodied sense of my values. It's like, oh, no, this is what I meant to do. And that's my goal for everybody. It's like, what is your
Yes.
role in the world, and the more that we can do that. And when I say in the world, I'm not talking necessarily, like, about your work. I'm just talking about your role in bringing what
Sure.
the
In your
world
time, in
needs.
your limited time here,
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, I am
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
on board for your grander mission. I like sign me up, whatever the
Yay.
petition.
My diabolical plan.
Absolutely. Put me on the guest list.
Great, great. You're invited.
It's yeah, it just isn't a binary world. It isn't a binary existence. Nothing in life operates in that way. I mean, everything operates on a spectrum from light, the basis
Literally.
of our universe essentially is on a spectrum. So therefore, everything does. It's just like you said, to reduce things down to it's this or it's that is no way to live a harmonious life. And like you said, you just want the greater world, the most people possible in the world to experience what it's like to not have to live that way. And that really resonated with me because I actually had a conversation recently with my own mom. We were on a beautiful sunset walk by the beach, and I got out of a relationship this summer that was a wonderful relationship. Like, by all means, we were really great to each other, wonderful people.
Yeah.
But our values were just not really there as far as like the long term. And I started, it's been an ongoing journey for me. It's been a year after year thing of like experiment, feel things, and then push them down and then do the thing you've always done, right? Do the pattern again and see what happens. So it's just been a nice, it's like climbing that ladder of pattern recognition. But, really this time I've really laid into my feelings of like, I just kind of operate very happily balanced in a more solo type of lifestyle. And I say the word solo instead of single because I think it's important to make that, if we're going to talk about language, I think that's an important language distinction because single, talk about binary living, single is like, oh, you are a singular, by yourself, poor little lonely thing. And I like the word solo because it reclaims this aspect of, actually, no, I'm fully complete. Like for instance, I'm a solo musician. I get paid to play solo music and everyone thinks I don't say everyone thinks it's good, but the people who come and enjoy it think that it's perfectly complete music. Right. So therefore a solo person is a valid, complete, able to find happiness person. They're not waiting in the wings until Mr. Right or Mrs. Right comes along, which is also okay if that happens too. But anyway, on this walk with my mom, she's a very open-minded lady. Love my mom. She asked me, well, what do you think, it means to your future if you don't decide to settle down with a partner? Like, what does that look like in the future? She wasn't asking with any kind of agenda. She was just really curious. And I just told her, I don't know. Just in the same way that people who settle down with people also don't know. But there's this, like you said, this cultural overtone of, well, if you settle with somebody, then you're good. You've got your person. You guys are going to sail off into the sunset until you're 85. And then like, you'll probably pass within a couple like hours of each other and it's all going to be just fine. And there's a million billion examples of how that doesn't always work out that way. But there's that when you take a different choice of like, well, I'm gonna explore this maybe taboo or culturally not accepted path, such as being solo or being polyamorous. People really want to know. They want to know if you're gonna be okay, or like, I think that really is the basis of it, is people actually just want to know that you're gonna be okay. It's not really as much about the judgment as it is they want you to be okay so that they can be okay.
Yeah.
But that conversation I kind of ended it by saying, if we're going to make this world a more open and loving and joyful place, And in my heart of hearts, love is just so not a limited thing. There's no shortage of it. It's not confined to one vessel or person or relationship. And if you really believe that, and you really want to see a world like that, you have to be one of the early adopters of that. Like, you have to be one of the ones who's willing to like start taking the steps to do the scary things instead of just kind of waiting in the wings for the change to happen or for the world to look like you want it to look like. You might never see it, and you certainly aren't going to have a hand in building it if it really is what's calling to your heart. Like you're saying, like, this is just your heart's calling. You had to put some other things away that you're proficient at, but was not really your heart's calling to like how you can actually see real change happen in the world, that's absolutely inspiring when you see it. And I'm sure you are seeing it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you said so much in there. And I want to go back to what you said about the not knowing. And I think another element of my work is being comfortable with the what is, with the this is what is right now. And oftentimes that is a not knowing. And that is nervous system work, because our sweet, lovely nervous systems, and I'm not going to get too into that, but they're wired to want to know, right? Like that
Yes.
is why we think in binaries, is because our nervous systems, which are very, connected to our brains, and that
Mm.
whole system is trying to keep us safe and secure
Yes.
all the time. And going back to like how we develop and what our nervous systems believe is
Mm.
safe and secure, right? Those are all of those things that it's like, okay, that's bad, that's good, that's bad, that's good. And that's kind of happening on that unconscious level. And not knowing, it can feel like hell to us. That not knowing can feel so destabilizing that making a yes or no decision isn't, it's like once you make the decision, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's just like, whew, okay,
Yeah.
a decision has been made. And so I think part of the work of nuance and non-binariness is having more tolerance
Yeah.
for nuance and non-binariness, for not knowing, and being able to say, okay, we are present with the not knowing. What does that feel like? Oh, that feels like my gut is totally in knots. Okay, let's turn towards that and welcome that feeling and just sit with it. What else comes up? Now my chest feels really tight. Like, and I do a lot of somatic work, so that's why I'm bringing in like how our body feels. But or like these are the thoughts that are coming up, and or like I feel like I want to run away, or I'm having images of something in my teenage years or whatever it is,
Mm.
that is like, oh, there have been times in my life when not knowing was actually really scary to me, or even just being a human, not knowing feels really scary. So I just want to like put a plug for, like, it's okay if not knowing is scary, because it is scary to humans. It is a very scary place. And I think the more we can intentionally sit with not knowing, I think it's also kind of the more we can do that,
Yeah.
the more knowing comes to us more easily, because we attune to ourselves a little bit more. We're not pushing away, because when we push things away, right, when we're not with the what is, then other kinds of things have room to come in and be like, now defensiveness, protection, all of those things that
Oh
you
yeah.
mentioned,
All the mechanisms. Yeah.
all the lovely mechanisms. They're all protective. They all have served a purpose. We love them. And yes, they aren't always serving us and our loved ones and our relationships.
Right.
And so, yeah, being present to the what is, which is really hard for people, myself included, but I think that is also some of the work. Like, okay, what is present here? What is present, and also what are some of the things we're maybe not even noticing that are also present? And that can take a long time. And I
It
think
can
it's
take
important.
a
Yeah.
lifetime. I mean,
I mean,
that
a lifetime,
is, yeah, it
literally.
probably will. So don't get your hopes up, guys.
It's hot.
It's going to take at least a few lifetimes, but no, that is fucking gold, because any listeners who are repeat listeners here, which I'm sure a lot of them will be,
Hi.
our first 3 episodes were a deep dive on obsessive compulsive disorder. It's something that I'm affected with and a lot of people in my life. And that is the basis of the disorder, is the inability to tolerate the uncertainty of things. So we use all of the lovely like protective mechanisms to control something, to have something in our lives that we can control. And whether you have OCD or not, it's just a part of being human, is this discomfort with uncertainty. It's kind of the nature of the name of the podcast, Comfort in Chaos, is that
absolutely
chaos is the name of the game
it's
here.
inevitable.
You know, there's at any moment, you're in California, you guys have like earthquakes and shit. I don't know.
Wildfires,
It's like
it's a mess here for sure.
You have to accept that, and it is, you know, like you said, it's the hardest thing, but it is the most rewarding thing to once you do learn to sit in it and find quote unquote comfort in that space. You start to realize and become attuned to when you start to pick up those mechanisms, when you start to act out of those patterns, and you can actually create space between the action and yourself, which then there goes the choice and the autonomy. So you don't have to act it out this time if you don't want to.
Absolutely.
And isn't that freedom?
I mean, yeah, I think that part, right, the choice point where, and I'm going to bring in kind of going back to the ecology, right? Like we look at broad systems, we look at capitalism, which is like fast, go, produce,
Yes.
urgent,
Pound
right?
it,
And
pound
so
the pavement.
pound the pavement, hustle, right? And like there are moments when emergency is real, right? Like there are emergent and chaotic moments in life that require us to do that. But when we are doing that all the time and it becomes a cultural norm and a societal, like way of life, and we internalize that and that urgency becomes kind of like, okay, I just have to like go really fast. We don't get the opportunity to slow down and have that choice point of okay, what do I want? What does the situation call for? What does my community, what does my loved one need or want right now? Am I able to meet that? Right? Like it doesn't have us asking questions, and that can happen quickly, right? Like we don't have to necessarily take 2 days to do that. Like, and the process can become more familiar as we do that intentional work.
Yeah.
But we have such a fast-paced culture, and I think part of my own just personal work right now is like slowing down, because I am a fast-paced baby. Like,
yeah,
I am efficient.
I can tell. I love it.
I mean, I'm on time to things, and I just have like, I call it like, I have a good relationship with colonial time, right? Like, I just like, I have been, it is something that my brain is like grokked onto and is like, cool, I got this. And that's just who I am. That's not anything I've tried to do, right? Like that's just a temperament thing. And so it's not better or worse than anyone else. And I'm efficient. And so, but I've noticed that has also become like, okay, I have to do that, as opposed to it's just this thing that I can do. And so now, as part of my kind of work and like slowing down, and as I've done that, I've been like, oh, like, wow, look at this whole world opening up. And I can snap into like, okay, I'm going to be, like I can still do things efficiently when I want to and need to, but it's not all the time.
Yeah.
And now I have more choice in how I respond to things, which makes it more intentional, which makes it more authentic, which makes it better relationships, right? I can see all of the kind of downhill movement, right? It's kind of that upstream. This is an anecdotal idea of upstream, kind of like you do that work and then things kind of can more feel like they fall into place in a way that is serving me and my world in a way that feels better,
Yeah, well, it's your patterns or your mechanisms, and there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of strength in those things, because
sure, and
some of it's part of your nature. You're just a faster, more whatever person, but they start working for you as opposed to you working to keep them alive.
Absolutely,
and then it's like you are just you have this, suddenly you're a powerful person with this tool belt of things you can tap into when the situation calls for it.
Yeah, I'm really partial to two parts work. There's this internal family systems, but this idea of like we all have these, like all of us have parts, within us, that we, that all have their own personas and personalities, and they interact with each other. And there is a core, we can call it self energy or self or higher self, again, whatever resonates most with one person. And oftentimes that self is hidden by these parts have kind of taken control of us.
Yeah.
And so when we can look at those parts, get to know them in a very I really want to know, what are you protecting? What are you doing? What is your fears? What are you, oh, I'm afraid that if Molly doesn't act really fast, she's going to be left behind. I don't know, right?
Yeah,
That's just
there's a
but
narrative.
So there's a fear that you say, oh, I can really understand that. And you get to know that, and again, this is long term, can be long term work, but you say, and then the self, some people see it as kind of like a big conference table where there's the CEO and that's you, which I don't love this language because I do not work in the corporate world at all, but I think it's something that we all can understand, right? Some kind of big table, right? There's a seat at the table for all of our parts. Yeah, there's a gathering, and there is someone who is in the leadership role, who is deeply taking into account everyone's opinions and ideas, and saying, okay, I think the best thing is to do this because I've taken into account, right? Everyone feels heard. No one needs to get really big and mad because they're not being heard. It's okay, I hear that. And thank you for that. And then the self gets to say, okay, based on all of these parts and understanding and, tending to those, then I can make these decisions. And the parts will calm down, really. I mean, they will say, okay, it's really about building that trust between this self and all of these parts that are within
we
us.
all have so many parts, and
we all have them.
That kind of, I think, is a perfect segue into talking on a broader or maybe a more focused scale as to how we relate. We have these internal parts, and then how we relate those to the outside world, which has a lot of parts to it. But in our culture, so, okay, if I say the word relationship, the first thing that most of the people listening right now are thinking is, well, let's be honest, me dating a woman. That's probably what the first thing most people conjure up. But me dating another human being or married to another human being that's romantically involved, and this is my special person, etc. That's when you say the word relationship, it's kind of the first thing that comes up.
Absolutely.
But we need to talk about how relationship, like you said, you believe everything is relational. I mean, I have a relationship to this phone right now that I'm getting information from. Whatever it is around me.
Don't we all have a relationship with our phones?
Yeah, actually, I think I'm in a monogamous relationship with my phone right now.
I mean,
it's pretty exclusive, actually.
Right.
But
primary partnership with our phones.
But yeah, let's talk about how relationship is so much broader. And even this, like you said, on your heart today was this sense of this deep connection to your friendships, your friend relationships, and how much they're filling your well and covering these parts of your internal family system with love and support that a lot of people think they're supposed to just get from one person. So I'd love to talk about I want to talk about the relationship escalator.
Sure.
In the terms of that normative wording. Can you give us a little bit of a synopsis of the escalator?
Yeah. So the relationship escalator is this idea, right? When you think of an escalator, it goes one direction, and we're talking about an upward escalator.
And it's moving,
it's moving. There's no thought to it. You get on, you get off at top, and you can't really stop it, right? Unless there's a malfunction, but you just go up. So that imagery of something that is just kind of and it's on a belt, right? It just keeps on looping around, and it goes up, you get on, no thinking, you're at the next place. So when we talk about the relationship escalator, and it's very much in non-monogamous circles, is this idea that in monogamy culture and in monogamy, you have this kind of escalator that you get on, you don't really, it's almost compulsive. You don't think about it too much, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we do think about it a lot, but you think like these are the next steps, and that's just what happens. So,
Yeah.
you meet someone, you maybe, have a first kiss, you date, you, depending on who you are, might have sexy times. You then, let's say you say, I love you. That's another step. Then you move in together. Maybe you do that for a year or two. Then someone proposes to someone, you get married, you have kids, you live happily ever after, right? And I think, yes, when I say that, people might roll their eyes and be like, well, that's not like, like that no one believes in happily ever after anymore. And sure. Like there are parts of that where I think there is a little more space for people doing things differently, or there's different points where it's like we break up before the whatever point,
right.
But then you go back to, okay, then I'm going to find the next person where I can, ride the escalator up with, and as opposed to what am I wanting, right? Like, I really like this person. I actually don't think that we would live together well, but I really like our sexual connection. I really like how they make me feel. We don't think like, well, why do I have to live with them, right? Like, can I have a relationship with this person and not live with them? I mean, also we're in late stage capitalism, and sometimes like living with someone is just like financial. Like, there's so many reasons, and I want to bring that in because like it's hard to live. Like, rent is expensive, but when we think about just like that compulsion to like these are the steps we do, and you don't even think about them. I want to make space and people in kind of the who are challenging just like mononormativity, which is like this kind of like pedestalizing of monogamy, is saying like, hey, well why? Why do we have to do it like this? Where are the options at any point of the way to change things and say, I actually like you said, like I like more of a solo lifestyle, like living. I personally, me Molly, thrive living alone, and I'm at the point where I'm like, I don't know if I want to live with someone, because, and I even when I've been non-monogamous, I have ridden that escalator, right? It's deeply ingrained. Even when I've been like deep in like non-monogamous theory and like doing it and coaching, I've still been like on that escalator because it is deeply ingrained in us.
Yes.
And so when you can pause and say, well, what do I actually want? Like, why do I have to do these things in this order, in this way, and you bring that, again, choice point and space into your own life and conversation. And I think oftentimes we use these escalator points, right? The I love yous, the moving in, as like, and this means that someone loves me, as opposed to how do they make you feel, right? Like love is a felt sense, right? Do you feel heard and understood and respected, and like you are able to communicate and really like have someone see you in your full complex humanity, right? Like that to me is more important than whether or not I live with you. And so what are we using as symbols of love as opposed to an actual felt sense of love? And because I think a lot of us have this unconscious fear of being unlovable, we can use the relationship escalator as a proxy, as kind of like if these things are happening, that means I'm lovable, right? Because society has deemed this as what is lovable, right? This little box of monogamy and of being in, like having the kids, having the marriage, having the home, having the, whatever the thing, having the things. Yes. And that is what means I'm lovable, and not actually having a felt sense. And I think people know that. Like if someone were to hear this and they'd be like, oh shit, like I feel lovable? And again, like we are all lovable. Every single person is lovable.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking more for the felt sense of feeling lovable, which is a personal work, because yes, people can make you feel loved and lovable, but that will be fleeting if you don't consider yourself lovable.
It can only be a reflection of what you're able to uphold in your own self.
Exactly. As is everything.
Yes. Right. Here we are again. Something mushrooms. I don't know.
It all comes back to the mycelial network.
But no, outstanding way of putting the relationship escalator, which is a term coined by Amy Gahran, which her book Stepping Off the Relationship Escalator is fantastic for anybody who just heard all of that and is like, wait a second, I think I need to like question why I'm writing this thing, or and I want to make a distinction that by giving it a name and by maybe deconstructing it, we're not trying to disempower those choices. Those
Totally.
say getting in a relationship and falling head over heels, saying I love you, having kids,
Feels
getting married. None of those
good.
things, and
Totally.
all of those things are a completely valid choice. The point is that if you're riding an escalator, you actually don't have a choice unless you oftentimes either get thrown off of it, or you jump off of it, or you tumble down it. There's not a lot of ways off the escalator. So I think Amy put this in her book, is like turning the escalator into a staircase, because a staircase is it's a choice thing, right? You choose to take the next step, or you choose to turn around and go down one step or down 3 steps. And that is something that is so not talked about in modern relationship culture, is this element of fluidity and choice and inclusion of yourself and your needs in the middle of the escalator going up. And
Totally.
I myself I've ridden the escalator up to, I don't know, one of the pretty high rungs. They're very close to creating another life. And it was a moment of, again, going back to finding communities that reflect values you didn't really even know you had. I found a child-free community at a time where I was really questioning that. And it was this like lock and key thing of like, oh, that's so authentic right now. And I have to be in that and explore that. And it was a hard thing, but the escalator did not allow for that change.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of
Yeah.
the crux of the work is in slowing and ultimately halting the unconscious movement of the escalator and making space for communication and choice within relationship, right?
Totally. Yeah, I see it as like a meandering path with little side paths that you can go,
Yeah, it's like a
like I
hobbit
like
journey.
it's a hobbit. It is the ultimate hobbit
They're
journey.
definitely foraging for mushrooms.
Definitely. Yeah, maybe not as intense as Frodo's
Yeah.
journey, but yeah,
Sometimes though.
it's some I mean,
I've met Gollum once.
yeah. we This year has been full of meeting golems. Yeah, no, but it really is. It's like where something slower than an escalator, right? Escalators are made for efficiency.
Yeah.
The escalators were great in capitalism because they get you where you need to go pretty fast. Um, and yeah, it's really about that slowing down and saying what do I want, because when I attune to what I want, especially in something as deep as relationships, right?
Yeah.
All relationships, right, friend, but like when I'm really attuning to that, then when I'm showing up in these spaces, like in when I meet people, when I like I know, oh yeah, you're my people, right? Like I think many of us have the experience of like we just meet
Yes.
someone, whether it's just like, again, doesn't have to be a romantic partner, but you meet someone, you're like, your vibe, your energy, like you are my people, and you have that knowing.
Yeah.
And that can happen on a romantic plane. It can happen, sometimes it happens, you go to a workplace and you're like, oh, this job, like these are my people, right? It is a sense that you have, and the more you can attune to that within yourself and know what does that sense of safety and security, or like, yesness feel like, then you can say, okay, like I'm going to be here present with my boundaries, with my fullest self, knowing that I will be honored and cared for, or ideally hoping, and knowing that, yeah, like if people are my people, they will want to honor and take care of me, and that will be a mutual
Yeah.
experience that will be reciprocal.
Right. And that is the exciting and challenging part of getting into this space, is that
Yeah,
I would say that it's still a very small amount of people who are even aware of what the term relationship escalator is, or
absolutely.
the different aspects of relationship. So it's really like when you meet someone like that, you're like, well, yeah, and then it can be really hard actually when you meet someone like that to then
Sure.
slow down, not take the escalator with them because you're like, well, this is it. We met on this level. And like you said, slowing it down and maybe even grinding it to a halt sometimes. Like if step one was I met this cool person and we vibe on this level and we love to share conversations and we like to go on walks together, but you don't really desire something more than that, or they don't desire something more than that. Like you don't want to have sex with them, or they don't want to move in with you, or whatever it could be, then the it's okay. Like that can be just that step, and that relationship is completely whole and wonderful and valuable and
Yeah. And
perfect.
it's okay to be disappointed, right? Like, I think, like, it is okay to feel a little heartbreak or a little sad. Like, it is okay to say,
Mm,
man, they want this thing from me, or they don't want this thing. And I really wanted that. And then how do we then say and sit with, like, this fucking sucks. And like they're totally valid. And I mean, of course, right? Like that's their experience. They don't want this with me. But how do we, sit with and really turn towards that disappointment as opposed to then doing all the behaviors that make us kind of numb out the pain? Because it's hard. Like that is an uncomfortable feeling. And it can tap into those, again, those monologues of I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm all these things. And I think that it's important again to being with the what is.
mm.
And sometimes that is what that is just like sadness and disappointment and just like, oh man, like I really was looking forward
Yeah.
to moving in with this person. Yeah, and that's all okay too.
Well, and I think again, like going back to the sitting with uncertainty thing, we're not really taught that in our culture to sit with our uncertainties and our uncomfortableness. We're also not taught how to sit with disappointment.
No.
And there's a lot of things to be disappointed about in the world, but
Everything.
especially in our dealings with other human beings. I mean, there's just so many things. But growing up, I'm a child of the '90s. I mean, all of the movies, all of the Disney movies taught us that no, if you connect with someone, like it's gonna happen within 2 hours. You're gonna be married, and then you just are gonna be perfect forever. And then I've so many examples in my lives of that not happening, right?
Yeah.
And I grew up a very introverted person, but very romantic and wistful, and always like pining for some forlonged lover. Um, and you can create these attachments to people or fantasies or whatever, and you think you're connecting and you were friends or whatever. And then, like you said, things can disappoint you, and that is okay. And you can feel that disappointment. Um, Actually, last night I was watching a movie. I was feeling kind of a little bit just in my feelings,
Mhm.
and so I put on a movie to kind of like sit in those feelings. And it was
Yeah.
have you seen the movie About Time?
I don't think so.
It's about
Should
like
do I need to watch it?
you should watch it. It's a little normative, I will be honest,
It's
but
okay.
it's like it is okay. And I really wanted to like be in that space, and it's about this guy. All the men in their family, which I kind of have a problem with this. All the men in the family are able to travel in time if they like go into a
Oh.
dark closet and clench their fists,
Oh.
and then they can go to anywhere in their lifespan, like back in time or forward in time. And director of About Time, if you listen to this podcast, let's make it men and women next time. But um, anyway, so there's a scene where early on he's like kind of learning that he can do this. He's like in his teens, and there's this girl. She's played by Margot Robbie. She's beautiful,
Mm.
and she's staying at their house for the summer. And so he's like deeply enamored with her, and he's building up the courage by the end of the summer to ask her like to basically be his partner or whatever, like confessing his love to her. And she responds by saying like, "Oh, your sister warned me this might happen. I was, I was told to just treat you like a brother, and that's how I see you." And he was just so let down. but he ran into the cupboard and went back in time. And she was like, well, if you would have told me maybe before that you had feelings like earlier in the summer, maybe we could have done something, not knowing
But he can actually do
that he
that.
could time travel. So he goes and he time travels back, and he tells her in the beginning of the summer, oh, I've got these feelings for you. We should, try to explore them this summer. And it didn't change the outcome. She just had another excuse as to like, well, how about you check in at the end of summer and see. And the narrator came, as the guy's voice, and he's like, and that's when I learned that you just can't, no matter what powers you have, you can't make someone love you.
Totally.
And, obviously we don't have the power to travel through time, and as far as I know, but it is that the disappointment of, we sometimes feel like we can, if we just put on the right look, if we just do the right pose, dance, whatever it is, like
take care,
present as the
compulsively of other people.
We find out exactly what it is that they need or want, and then we present this way, and then the disappointment of that on both ends is that you need to be okay with the disappointment of it not happening, as opposed to the temporary excitement you would get if you achieved that, but then you can't keep up the appearance. And I think we've all been in that scenario where we pursue this thing that is, like we said, culturally just so pushed on us, or like, if you feel a connection, you've got to like get this person. So you do whatever you can to do it. And then you end up on an escalator with someone that you cannot even continue to please.
Yeah. No, that was
just a moment from the movie I watched last night. I was like, that actually kind of.
No, but again, it's that not being present to what is, and not being, able to, because if I mean, I haven't seen this movie, but if he were just able to be like, man, I'm really disappointed. Like, what did I learn about this? Oh, maybe in my future relationships, when I start feeling something for someone, I will express it, right? And then continue. And this is a teenager, right? Like continuing to experiment with the human condition, right? Being like, oh, I learned this thing about myself, this disappointment, that was really hard, but I sat with it and I learned more, maybe, that like, I don't want to wait on feelings, and then maybe you do that a couple times, and one time it works, and another time someone's like, whoa, that's too soon. You're like, okay, and then you just get to know yourself relationally better, other humans, and other humans is a broad category, right? Because every human is so different. But I mean, there's so many ways you could go with that little allegory.
Yeah, and I, not to like, I don't want to just now make this a mushroom and about time review podcast, just a double feature, but just to kind of continue just for a second, in that, this guy's power gave him the ability to go back and try to avoid the pain of rejection, of disappointment. And actually, there's a lot of other examples in the movie where he does this, and he actually does end up, with the person he is supposed to, quote unquote, be with. But there's many times where there's like these awkward interactions, and he's like, hold on, let me just go back and try that again. And with the information, which we kind of can do, but not in a, not necessarily. The point is,
well, now we're begging the question of, is time linear, which don't even get me started.
The thing that it made me think of was, you have a post on Instagram that is titled, "The point of relationships is not to avoid pain."
Mm-hmm.
And
yes, I believe that.
Yeah. So, this example in the movie, this guy's literally going back in time to avoid the pain of the awkwardness of relating with another human being. But like, there's so much to be distilled and learned and expanded through the painful moments, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think pain pain is just another, and pain is such a broad category, right? We've talked about disappointment and sadness and grief and heartbreak and um, but uncomfortable feelings are a part of life.
Yeah.
And kind of going back to that, being present to what is, it's also about being able to metabolize what's going on, metabolize our emotions. We're not pushing away. We're not, right? It's so that they can move through us and they don't get stuck.
Yes.
Right. And we can do that with ourselves. We can do that with other people, right? There's this idea of co-regulation, which is kind of nervous system to nervous system. How do we support each other and be present to each other? We can do it with our self-regulation of like, okay, I'm present to myself. I'm present to what is. And this pain is what is here. And how do I sit with it so that it can move through my body? Maybe I'll get some learnings from it. You don't have to learn from it. It's not like everything that we go through has to be a learning, but sometimes, especially when there are these bigger, like when we kind of start realizing like, oh, maybe I have these patterns that have been showing up throughout my relationship history, right? My romantic relationship history or friend relationship history. And I think with that, more often than not, comes a lot of grief. Grief for our younger selves, grief for how we weren't able to be loved, grief how for so many things, the grief for the world and how it prevents us from being in authentic relationship. And when you sit with that, when you can say, okay, like grief, I'm here with you. Like, let's just be here in this moment. Let me cry. What do you need from me? What do I need from you? How can we kind of be in this together, right? Like grief is its own thing, right? It's like there is grief, capital G. It is an entity, or heartbreak, or whatever it is. So that then it's like, okay, like I have moved this through my system, and that can take. I mean, my process of grieving, I think, took me about 10 months, right? And it was not just a breakup; it was like all of my pasts. Like it was like a whole big thing, and it had its ups and downs. And I think I can like say that like, oh, like I have metabolized that, right? And I have moments of sadness. I have moments of, it's not that like everything's hunky dory. Absolutely not, right? Like that's not how it works. But it's about like now I know what that looks like and feels like, and I know how to move that through so that I can be more present to the world and my relationships.
Right. And take that emotional information, like you said, and metabolize it, digest it, as opposed to just using all the different myriad internal and external mechanisms we can use to block it out indefinitely until it's beating down our door. We can actually let it in, let it metabolize, and then use that wisdom, because there is so much wisdom inside of grief and pain. Like you said, not avoiding the pain in relationships, to then go forward in our future relationships or in our other relationships in our lives and be so much more available and so much more present and wisely able to take care of them. And in that way, we can time travel, because here we are with this deep metabolized wisdom, and now we're in this totally new situation, but as a more informed person. And that's like going back in time to the future, Back to the Future. Let's talk about that movie.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well, I think, going back to this idea of parts work or inner child work, that it is kind of like this unconscious time traveling, right? There is work you can do to like go kind of back in your personal timeline and be that loving, unshaming presence for a child who wasn't met, who initially was taught or like was internalized the message of you're only lovable if you don't cry, right? Or whatever it is, so that then you can be in a place where you're like, no, it's okay to cry. I am still lovable if I cry, right? That's just one example of how you can actually do essentially like unconscious time travel, or like do that time travel. I think it's really cool that you brought that example, because we can do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's always here whenever you're ready for it. And there's no timeline, there's no rush, but it sure is rewarding when you dive in.
Yeah.
I love that you brought up the that aspect of sitting with grief. And there's so many, like we said, so many sources of grief, especially in today's world. I mean, like, it's not just the grief of losing like a loved one, through mortality, but just going to the grocery store sometimes is grief for me. I mean, just seeing the way things are and little things can just kind of add. I heard this really fantastic quote. I wish I knew who said it. I just tried to look it up. We'll just say it and share it and give them love, whoever they are. But it was, grief is the heart's way of loving what it misses.
Mm-hmm.
So it is just, grief is just another side of love. It's love
Absolutely.
without the subject that it once directed it towards.
Absolutely. They're two sides of the same coin.
Right. When you can start to accept grief into your life as this element of love, then it doesn't necessarily feel good. There's a painful side to it, but it feels productive in a way. It feels like, okay, I'm feeling this for a reason, and I'm going to be better off for allowing it to be felt. And
yes,
yeah, but on that, going from that quote, as we kind of get towards the end here, we kind of want to go into heartbreak a little bit, because it is another aspect of relationships and love that doesn't, well, actually it does I'll say it gets sung about more than it gets talked about.
That's a good way of putting it. Yes.
But I had a friend of mine who was stalking your Instagram, and she really wanted me to bring up the topic of the heartbreak of what if, right? And that is kind of this sense of grief of longing for this thing that we no longer have, or that maybe never happened, right?
Yeah.
So talk a bit about that.
So, I think I'll even just talk about heartbreak in the very normative sense of like a breakup. Let's just talk about that, because I think it's let's delight in the heart in the normative idea of heartbreak, when you're like, I'm heartbroken because someone broke up with me, right? We when we enter into a relationship, and this is a normal human thing, we have an idea of someone, right? Like, we see them in front of us, and most of the time it's like, oh, this is the kind of person who will love me. This is the kind of person who
actually
will,
most of the time now we don't see them in front of us. We see like
see them on the
digital reflection of them, and then we see like their words.
But what they choose to write about themselves, right? You start texting, oh, they're really smart. Look at the, like, you have an image, right? Of how they are, of who they are, of how they will treat you. You get to know them. That is either bolstered, and you're like, yes, they continue to be this person, and that means that they can love me in this way, and that means that this fantasy I have of my life could come true. And you continue relating to them and being in a relationship, and then things change and they break up with you. And not only is it just, there's just heartbreak in itself is just a feeling of, oh no, someone doesn't love me in the way that I want to be loved with them. But I think there's also this element of, what if something had been different and I couldn't, like, there can be this kind of added element of pain, of the heartbreak of, was there something I could do? Or what if we could have had this relationship extend longer? What if the fantasy could be real? And then it can get into kind of turning on ourselves of like, what could I have done to prevent this?
Or in the context of like, in the context of this normative example, what if I wasn't so non-normative? What if I didn't have the urge to be polyamorous, and the person I wanted to be with was monogamous? And then you can really just layer on this guilt and shame and pain. Just wanted to bring in that example because that is totally a thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. What if I shared this really personal, vulnerable thing with them? What if that was the thing that made them not love me? Which rarely is that the case, I would say. Maybe
and if
sometimes,
it's the thing, yeah, right, you should be okay with that.
Right. And I think it's really that, like, man, what if we had more time together? It's just all of these questions can come either to the surface or under the surface of our consciousness of, how could it have been different? And that adds to the pain of the heartbreak. And I think it's something that isn't always talked about. It's just like, I'm just I mean, I think it's just it's just one facet of, one plane of heartbreak. But it was coming up for me a lot in my heartbreak of, man, what if XYZ thing had happened? What if one of us had healed more? What if then could it have worked, right? And then you kind of keep latching onto this ideal and fantasy.
Yeah.
Which I have a strong relationship because my Venus is in Pisces. If anyone knows what that means.
All right. Part 2 of the interview is just
Part
all
two,
astrology.
I'm queer. I have to plug that in. But yes, no, I think that the fantasies we have, which are going to happen, there's nothing wrong with having fantasies and desires and things that aren't fully based in reality, and looking at those and being like, okay, what are the what ifs, and how realistic are they, and is it just kind of another defense mechanism or another way of coping with the pain of just like, this sucks and I'm disappointed.
Yeah. No, that's a hard facet of heartbreak, because
it is, they're all hard shit. I mean, not always, actually. Sometimes there's joy and excitement and newness.
yeah, there's
in
like the 5 days post breakup or like it's after the
Totally.
24-hour cry cycle and before
you're like,
the
oh.
2-week grief cycle. So you got like this time period of like, I'm gonna
Totally.
get some. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I'm a free bird.
Yeah, but I've definitely in my recent grief cycle have sat a lot with the what if, right? And especially in terms of like, well, what if it's me? What if and I think it's actually, now that I'm saying it, is actually an important what if. What if is important to sit with. Like, there doesn't have to be an answer to it, but it's an important question to ask, because a lot of the times when we go through heartbreak of any kind, but in this example of a romantic relationship, if we don't ask the question, what if, like, say, for instance, what if I'm adding to this pattern that I keep breaking up with people, or people keep breaking up with me? Oftentimes, and I'm guilty of, like, 3-4 breakups, were just like, oh, it was so them. They acted like a lunatic, and I just was I was protecting myself, and I had to get out of there. Therefore,
Yeah.
I'm the innocent one, and they are the villain.
Yes.
And that's never true. Well, there's elements of truth that can be true in that. But,
rarely, yeah.
But oftentimes we have such a role, and so if you can actually allow yourself to kind of just sit with the what ifs of like, well, what if I would have been different? Or what if next time I don't act in a way that plays out these patterns that tend to lead to...
What attracts me to a little bit of chaos in someone else? Why is that something that is attractive to me? Who does that remind me?
What if next time, or what if next relationship I get into, I don't hide the fact that I'm, solo or polyamorous or queer or whatever it is? There's almost like a shift, right? You can turn towards the what if of possibility.
And I think it can also attune us to our own desires, right? Like, if there's something that you're like, what if? It's like, oh, maybe I want this thing. Like, maybe I do want this thing that I've been denying myself. I've been saying like, well, that's silly. But then you're like, oh, this element of heartbreak is actually maybe illuminating that maybe I do want, more of a non-monogamous lifestyle, or more of a... I mean, honestly, for me, I've realized, which is very funny because I'm, like, I've realized I would never call myself monogamous, but I'm like, I actually don't have the energy for more than one romantic partner, right? Because like, love is absolutely abundant and unlimited, but time and energy are not, right? There are there are resources that exist in our life, time and energy being one of them. And I realized, especially because I want such a thriving friend community, that like, the amount of energy that romantic relationships take on me, and I love giving that, like, I don't have that, for at least right now in my life, as I've kind of, again, reoriented to extroversion, introversion, right? Like, I don't have unlimited energy for romantic relationships, because they do take a different kind of energy from me than my friends do. And that's a reality for me, right? This is just for me. And so one might look at me and say like, oh, that person's monogamous. even though like I more identify with relationship anarchy as the sense of like my friends are actually just as important to me as my romantic relationships. It's different energy because of, I don't know, nervous system and attachment, right? But like,
Yes.
but it's still not monogamy to me. I mean,
that circles all the way back to the very beginning of your grand plan for the world to experience a less binary existence. And in the binary, right, saying that you don't have space right now for more than one romantic partnership, like you said, everyone points at you and goes, well, then you're monogamous. Like,
totally.
You can't be, you either have to have 5 partners and doing the whole shibby dibby, or like you are monogamous or you're single. Like,
but I also, sorry, I didn't.
No.
I just want to say, I said romantic, not sexual, right? Like I can only have one romantic partner, but I might have a couple sexual partners, right? Like there's so much more.
Exactly.
Than what we think of.
There's part of the grand plan in itself. Not to have multiple sexual partners. That's not the overarching goal, but it is included.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, just that sense of making space for the entire spectrum of where you're at now, like you said, attuning to it and not having to label it like it, just because you're not doing one thing doesn't make you the other thing. And that's it.
Yeah.
Case closed.
Be who you want to be. Just be kind to people and figure your shit out. That was way too hard. I would never say that, but also kind of.
No, we're keeping it in for sure.
No, I think it really is like, finding out what makes what makes you feel the most joy and authenticity.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you're moving away from that, what's going on? Who are you with? And really attuning to those things and saying, oh, I have a friend where every time after I spend time with them, I just feel like crap about myself. Like, okay, why do you feel like you have to be friends with this person? What's going on there? What are the things and the people that after you leave them, you feel, just lighthearted and happy and, you sleep better or your anxiety is quelled, right? What is it about those relationships and those people that maybe you want more of in your life?
I love that.
Yeah.
And, I would love to be as bold as to say that everyone that's ever lived is polyamorous. And let me provide some context here, because that may be a hot take. What I'm saying is, and not in like the clinical definition of having multiple romantic partners, that could even be more defined as non-monogamy, I'm not sure, but that everyone's heart has the ability to love more than one person. Because don't we all love our mothers, our fathers, our cats, our friends, our romantic partner? I love my cat too. He's locked out of this room because he is a pest, but I love him so much. And so we're born into this, if we want to break down the etymology of the word, poly meaning more than one, multiple, and amorous meaning love. Multiple loves. We all have multiple loves. And it doesn't have to be this, like you said, you're in or you're out club kind of thing of you're either with those guys or you're with these guys. We all have the capacity for a lot of love. And we all have the permission to make that look how we want it to, with the consent of everyone in our lives.
Yes. We deem it right here that we give you permission to love multiple people, but do it honestly. Don't cheat on people. But
that's just socially acceptable, non-ethical, non-monogamy.
Non-consensual non-monogamy is a no-go in my book. But
Molly, this has been such a well-filling conversation. I'm really glad we didn't choose one specific tact, because I think we've touched on a lot here. And it's really left me with a lot. I'm charged up. I need to go jump in the ocean or something.
Do it. I love that.
Yeah.
This has been really great.
It's been awesome. Do you want to take a moment just to talk about this new exciting venture in your life of launching a website and how people can get in touch with you through that and what you do through that website?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so yes, I just launched a website on last Friday, which was September 1st, and I'm a relationship coach. I think we talked a lot about what I do, and I think pretty much everything we talked about today are things that I can support you with. So I feel like if you listen to who I am and you feel intrigued about who I am and what I do, like this episode actually this conversation fills that in.
It's a
But
good
really,
round.
yeah, really, and it really is like if you are struggling in your relationships, and again, I do have a leaning towards queer and non-monogamous folks or people who are questioning any of who they are and identities or what kind of relationships you want, or if you and your partner are thinking about opening up, or you are non-monogamous and you're looking for support in all of that. Those are things I can support with. I really look at it through a healing lens, and I wouldn't come to me if you only want support with relationship agreements, because to me I'm going to get into a little more of the tender stuff, right, of like, what do these mean
The
to you?
mycelium network of the heart.
The mycelium network of the heart. Yeah, like I really, I do have like I have a therapy background. I'm also a therapist, and I do counseling on the side. So and coaching is slightly different. I'm not too pressed about their differences, except I'm very clear on the boundaries between the two. But I think I come from a place of, I really do want to look at this from like, how are we healing ourselves through our relationships? And so, yeah, so you can read about me, and there's just a contact page where you connect and just email me, and I will get back to you usually within like 24 to 48 kind of business days or whatever. And and then we go from there, and we do, I'll offer a consult call. Consent is really important to me, so giving you the chance to meet me and see if vibes are right.
Yeah, vibes.
Vibes, it's all about vibes. And then, yeah, and you can find me on Instagram, Bonobo. So my business name, I actually don't think I've said this, is Bonobo Relationships. And we haven't even gotten into bonobos, but there's an FAQ about them on my website. But my Instagram is bonobo.relationships. That's BONOBO.relationships. So,
And y'all seriously check out this Instagram, because it's such a great, again, I'm just proud of you for the way you've put this out there, because it's,
thank you.
Yeah, no, it's really digestible, and it's really non-polarizing, like, which I think is a really rare thing to see on social media these days.
I'm not going for shock factor. Every once in a while I am. Every once in a while I'm like, ooh,
yeah,
there's
a few of those posts.
I know, I'll be like, it's my shit post. But that's just when I have my little mischievous mood on. I'm like,
yeah. But yeah, everyone definitely go check out the Instagram, get some of this, just awesome little deep dives, or like little, like you said, hobbit journeys.
I love that. Yeah. Little hobbit journeys. And little forays into the woods.
Especially the website. It's bonoborelationships.com.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. I think there's going to be some listeners here, honestly, that are going to be really curious about what you have to offer. And I know I am. So if this was just for me, I'm happy.
This was fantastic. It was so lovely connecting with you, Eli.
You too, Molly.
I will.
We'll be in touch for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right.
Happy foraging.
Thank you. I hope you find some as well in your
I don't think I'll find one. If I find one in the ocean, I'm not going to eat it. But
okay, good call. But I bet, not too far away.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Bye. You too.
All right, y'all. That was Molly Reagh from Bonobo Relationships. Links to her Instagram and website are in the show notes below. As always, if you leave me a review, give me some feedback, subscribe to the podcast, it's very helpful. I want to know more about what you guys are looking for out of a podcast like this.
and how I can bring more interesting guests into these conversations. So thank y'all so much, and take care. Cheers.